Hey everyone, I'm now on Patreon. Click the link below. Not only keep the free content coming with tutorials, tips, podcasts, etc., but get a bunch of free stuff like live stream Q&As, copy of my book, voting on topics, behind the scenes, bunch of cool stuff. Click the link down below to join. Hey everyone, welcome to episode 6 of the Scott Stokely podcast. This one is going to be incredibly special. I hope you guys tune in. Let me, first off, right off the bat, if you're listening to this on something other than YouTube, we're going to go ahead and post the audio, but this is not going to translate to audio. You're going to have to go over to the Scott Stokely YouTube channel and watch it there. This is going to be a visual podcast. Now, I said I was going to be all over the place with this podcast, and I am. This one's going to be a bit different. Not only is it mostly based in video, but it's going to take place over the course of 7 days. And it's going to be edited together, and we might even try to put in some music and some stills and maybe get a little fancy with it. Don't get spoiled. They're not all going to be like this. But so we are outside of Moab, Utah, where I've been a lot of the summer. And the reason this is a special podcast is that the next 7 days are going to take place on my absolute favorite place on the face of the earth. I have traveled extensively, and there is no experience like this. And I have an agenda. I have a real agenda. I want to inspire some of the people watching to think, that's cool. I want to go do that too. Because the podcast, a lot of this is going to not just be about what I'm doing, but about how to do it. It's incredibly unique. And let's get started. So, we are at the shores of the Green River. Let's just take a quick look. The Green River in Utah. And we are at the edge of Canyonlands National Park. So go ahead and pan around. Give you an idea of what Canyonlands looks like. It's canyons. Beautiful red rock. Gorgeous, absolutely stunning canyons. Now, when we were driving in, the first thing, and I will attach a clip, I'm not sure how well it came out, but we were driving down this road with these vertical drop-offs, a couple places, to your death if you come in. We were on an outfitter drove us into this location, and we saw people base jumping off of these cliffs, and I got it on video, and then happened to meet the base jumpers. They were they're a unique breed. They're awesome. But they jump off these several 100-foot cliff faces and to their death until their chutes open. So this trip, the Green River trip, there's a couple things about this that make this so special. And we'll start walking down here in a second, but it is one of the longest, or it may be the longest stretch of flat water in the world. I believe it's the longest in the US for sure. There's a minimum of 110 miles where the water has 0 rapids, which means you can float down in a canoe or a kayak or a raft. Now, I say 110 miles because there's a 110 mile stretch of this river that really only has one main way in and out of the river at about the 55-mile mark. So for the most part, it's 55 miles of desolation. And I mean truly desolation. Someone's going to be pulling up. We're not alone down here, so this is remote. So we're definitely going to be getting people joining us. So when you take this trip, it's typically a 5 to 7 day trip. There is literally no way in or out of these canyons except at the entry points. There's a couple little Jeep roads and some secret entrances, but you don't see people there. So when you're on this trip, you don't see people fishing. There's no one getting drunk on a campsite next to you. There's no car noises, well, except here, because this is where you're putting in. But you have complete isolation. Come on, let's walk down towards the river. So the idea of this is that you literally get away from all other humans. We are doing this lower 55 miles. We're going to do it in 7 days. And on probably 5 of the 7 days, we won't see another person, not one. And the 2 days we do see somebody, we'll be on shore and someone in a canoe will go by for 3 minutes, we'll wave, and we won't see them again. Other than airplanes, there's no man-made noises other than your own. And it's amazing because out here, you can hear the desert. Like, it seems like there's nothing alive here except for some like shrub brush and maybe a couple lizards. And you might see a couple birds here and there. The blue herons migrate through here. They're huge and gorgeous. But when you get silent, you hear animal noises all throughout the desert. You don't see them. They're pretty good at hiding, but you don't see them. There is no human markings on this trip, except for right here. There's one thing, the sign that says Mineral Bottom, because you want to know this is where maybe your trip is going to get picked up. But when you camp, there's no campsites with signs that say campground number 3. You look for a flat piece of ground and you pitch a tent. And typically you find places where people have camped before, so it's been brushed away and you other people have used it, but it's not designated. There's no signs. So you are really, truly in the backcountry. Now, throughout here, Native Americans lived for centuries, well, for millennia, for thousands of years. And there are ruins and petroglyphs. There are cave dwellings that you find in these canyons, but none of them are marked. There's no signs that say, check out the cave dwelling. And in fact, they purposely leave them off maps because, unfortunately, just like wild caves, if the public knows about them, they get destroyed. It's very sad. But the first time I came here, we wanted to see Native American ruins. And we asked the outfitter, we use a company that drives us up here, drops us off in a canoe, and then picks us up 7 days later at the Colorado River in a canoe. But we asked them, where do we find the Indian ruins? Where do we find the Native American ruins? It was called Indian ruins back then, times have changed. But where do we find the cave dwellings? That's what we wanted to see. And his answer was, he says, I'm not going to tell you. And my first thought was, what a chip. Wait a second, we're paying you money to take us out here and drop us off. And what he said was, imagine you lived here. When you're floating down the river, imagine this is where you're making your home. This is where you're going to raise your family. This is where you're going to survive. Where would you live? And he left it at that. And I still felt a bit gypped at the time, but not by the time my trip was done. This is my 4th time on this river. So when you look for it and you just imagine, that looks like a good place to live if I was going to live down here, and you climb up there and all of a sudden you find cave dwellings. And the history of the people that lived here before, and it's beautiful, but it's also, it's tragic, it's sad, it's all those things. It's both, right? The world's not black and white, and so there's joy to be had by finding these things, and then you also feel for what was lost. But let's go take a look down. So what happens is you, and I'll go over this, the details. I'll put this at the end. It's the least interesting part. But Tex Riverways is where the outfitter I've always used. You rent a canoe. You rent a portable toilet because there's not enough rain here to wash anything away. If you dug a hole and used the ground, it would be a litter box out here. So you bring a portable toilet with you. It's actually in the park you're required to. And they give you your canoe, your toilet, and most important, they drive you up and they drop you off either at Ruby Ranch, which is the top of the 110-mile stretch, Mineral Bottom, which is where we are, and then they pick you up at either Mineral Bottom or the Confluence. The Confluence is where the Green River hits the Colorado River, and they pick you up in a jet boat. Now, they don't pick you up on the Green River because, and this is so cool, there are no motorized boats allowed here. So you want to have solitude and peace and quiet, there's no jet skiers here. By the way, I love jet skiing, love it. But that's not what should be happening here, and it's not. So basically, this right here is how we're gonna live for the next 7 days. And because you're in a canoe, like I do so much backcountry camping where you're pretty much like you're packing a backpack in and you're eating beef jerky and saltines, basically. Maybe not that rough, but there's no luxuries when you're putting on a backpack and you have to carry every single thing. But in a canoe, you get a little bit of a compromise here. So we actually have an ice chest. It's almost entirely filled with ice, but we can stick a few water bottles in now and then, keeps, you know, have cold drinks on the trip. But other than that, basically all that you see here is just tent, sleeping pads, a couple camp chairs, and food. You don't need anything else here. In fact, if you bring too much to do, I think you're actually missing out on what this trip's all about. I mean, there's plenty to do. Actually, you'll keep plenty busy just paddling, finding campgrounds, setting up your camp every night, breaking down in the morning, preparing food. But when you have time, everywhere you look, there's things to do and there's places to explore, and there's just endless canyons to hike up and find things that maybe only a couple thousand people on the face of the earth have seen, because you can't get to it from up above the canyon. You can only get to it, these canyons you can only get to from this river, most of them, and you can only get to the river in a raft, a kayak, or a canoe. So you have to work for it, but the trade-off is you get something that is unique. And I do this trip every few years, and so this trip's going to be a lot about just kind of telling you what to expect. And if a few people or a few hundred people eventually decide to come on this trip, it'll be one of the best gifts I've ever given to my frisbee family, because no one's going to come out here and regret it. Final thing, in case you're wondering, this entire trip for the week, including food, for two people, less than $1,000 for the entire week. So as far as trips go, there is no less expensive trip, and there's no better place on earth that I'm personally aware of. Someday my ashes will be sprinkled right in this river. I've thought about Oak Grove Park, I've thought about all the frisbee places, but this is my most special place in the world, and I'm going to share it with you guys. So I hope you enjoy. So day one, when you're looking for a place to camp on the Green River, number of places you can look for. You can look for just a piece of flat ground off to the side, which there's not a lot of because of the cliffs and the spree. But another way to camp is sandbars. So we found a cool sandbar. It's actually an island. We're surrounded on both sides of the river by water. It's a wide river. Pull up the canoe, tie it off, and then this whole thing belongs to us. This is our own country. We get to make our own laws. We can legalize debauchery if we choose. But there's no one here. We're not going to see anyone the rest of the day. I mean, this canyon belongs to us today. Really cool. Wow, we were just floating before we got here, and there was a pretty big bird flying by. And, you know, you heard it fly by. And it was surreal because you almost forget that birds' wings make noise when they flap. I mean, just the ambient city noise. I mean, even when it's quiet late at night or quiet in the mountains, you know, at a campground, there's always traffic noise. Even if you don't realize it, there's something going on in the background. There's city noise miles and miles away. There's zero of that here. The bird wasn't that close, and you could hear it flapping its wings like it was done with, I was gonna say CGI, but audio special effects after the fact. It was so foam. So yeah, it's like it's dead silent other than the sounds of animals and wind. So this is our view. Check this out. So this is just as beautiful as it is. This is almost just a standard part of this trip. That's why you guys got to do this. Please promise me you're going to do this. Some of you. Somehow a natural arch has formed in the side of the cliff face. That's probably, I'm going to guess 500 or 600 feet from here to the top. So it's probably about a 250 or 300 foot wall. So it's like a 200 foot tall arch. Although where it is, it's never going to actually form an arch completely. It's not going to be see-through. But you can see how the arches out here are made because nature made it for us. And the rest of our view is this beautiful canyon. It's also gorgeous, the contrast of the green. It's the only green around because it's the banks of the river. And this is just day one. So now is a great time to talk about weather because it is absolutely perfect out. And it's going to be this way all week. I can predict that. No, not really. So according to statistics, 91.3% of people that have a bad time in the backcountry is due to weather, and 94.7% of people who get dead in the backcountry is because of weather. I just made both of those up, but I'm pretty sure it's close. Weather is serious. You are not protected from the elements the way you are in your daily life. You have layers, you have a sleeping bag, a tent. That helps, but you got to take the weather serious. If you don't take it serious, you're going to have a bad time. So, first off, when to come. Look at that, you hear the birds chirping, it's so great. Right off the bat, winter is not a good time to come. It's, I don't know, we're at 3,000 or 4,000 feet. Google it. But just because it's a desert does not mean it doesn't get cold. It gets stupid cold. I'm not even sure the outfitters run. So take winter out of the equation. You can do the trip in the summer. I've done a summer trip. I believe it was June, so it wasn't the hottest months. But it was still, I mean, had a great time. But it was still a little bit too much. It gets hot. I mean, it's the desert. It gets stupid hot. You get dehydrated super quickly. You probably need something around 2 gallons per day per person, which means if you do a week-long trip, you're talking about 28 gallons of water you have to bring with you, or bring a filtration system, which takes time and effort, a whole other set of challenges. I would just honestly avoid those months. The best time to come is spring or fall. Now, both of them are going to have fantastic weather. Spring adds one other challenge, but there's an upside to it as well. Well, a couple challenges actually. So in the spring, you can get, when the snow's melting at its meltiest, is that a word? Melty? Okay, when the snow is at its meltiest up in the mountains, the water rises, of course, in the river downstream, and it goes faster. Most of the year it runs about 2-ish miles an hour, which is a perfect pace to relax and float, but make ground without a lot of effort. When it runs at 5 miles an hour, that's fast, deceptively fast. The two challenges that come with that, first is you have to be prepared the whole time for like when you're gonna land on shore. I mean, if you come around a bend and you're in the middle of the river and you see a campsite on the side, you're probably not getting to that campsite. As fast as you paddle, you're gonna, campsite's here, you're paddling, boom, 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 you're gonna blow right past it. Even if you get to the campsite, it can be hard to actually land because you're going so fast. It can be a drag. I mean, it's still a blast, but it can be a drag. The other challenge with the fast water is if you're doing one of the 55-mile stretches, if you come out for say 6 days and 5 nights, you're basically paddling 5 days. It's 11 miles a day. Just floating is a 5.5 hours a day. With a little bit of paddling, it's 4 hours on the river, and that's plenty of time to relax. And you know, you got 4 hours to see 10 miles of terrain, which is gorgeous, you know, from the comfort of a chair, well, canoe seat. When the water's running fast, like you could literally knock out to 55 miles with a little bit of paddling in a long day. You don't want to do that. That's not what this trip's about. It's not about the destination, it's about the journey. So when it runs fast, next thing you know, you've just covered 20 miles and you go, oh. Just to give you an idea, I did the full 110 miles in 5 days, in 5 miles an hour, and we didn't even have to work that hard for it. 5 miles an hour, a little bit of paddling, you're going 7 miles an hour. Like, it's more fun if you can relax. So that's the downside to the high water, but there's an upside. If you can get it in the spring when the water's high but not running as fast, and there's windows where this will happen, talk to Tex Riverways, there is a number of places to camp that are up closer to the cliff faces. Like right now, we're in another sandbar. We're gonna try to find some of the high ground camping, but this is more exposed sandbars because we're in the fall and the water's low. It's great, but some of the campsites that are back in these canyons are absolutely, like, they look like something out of Star Trek. I mean, they're so surreal, and these gigantic boulders and these precipices that are like hanging over like a cliff face. And I mean, but enough room to put a tent on. You open your door and there's a drop off to the water. I mean, it's spectacular, and you just can't get to them in low water. So you have more access to some of these campgrounds when the water's up. Also, some of the box canyons that you would, and in fact we will, pull up the canoe and hike up. Some of them you can paddle up, sometimes quite a ways. In fact, one time I paddled up, I was with someone, we paddled up a canyon, way up a canyon, and then found like a lagoon up one of these canyons. And then we pull into this lagoon, and there was a beaver that was our friend for about 24 hours, who was building a dam the whole time. We just sat there where we had a show, a live performance by this beaver. They would chop down a tree, swim out, put it there in this lagoon. And I don't know why it was damming up a lagoon, but it was. Anyways, it's like we wouldn't have, well, we could have hiked to it, but we got to paddle. We got to paddle right to the shore in this lagoon. It was the coolest thing. So high water's cool, but just not when it's running fast. I just don't recommend that. So just talk to Tex. A couple other things about the weather. Well, first off, one more thing. Even when it's warm out, unless it's like the middle of summer, bring layers, because it's going to get cold tonight for sure. So first is rain. Now, it's the desert, so they only get a few inches of rain a year, but it happens in extremely powerful bursts, and they're unexpected. They come out of nowhere. They can come during the day, at night, but the weather could say 0% chance of rain all week, and that's because it looks like this all week, except for that 8 minutes where these black clouds showed up and a torrential downpour for 8 minutes. It's not the end of the world, because your stuff will dry out pretty quickly. At the same time, though, like, you always want to put your rain guard on your tent, no matter how nice it is. Don't go to sleep with it exposed. You may wake up drenched. So people in the canoe coming, perfect. Our first passerbys today. But the bigger issue with rain is flash flooding, and flash flooding is a real thing in canyons. It's something to not take lightly. The big river is not going to flash flood. Okay, there's too much volume here. You're not really going to notice it. However, in these small canyons, when you go up these little box canyons, you do not want to camp at the base of these canyons. I mean, you find it's sandy, it looks nice. Well, the reason why is because it floods occasionally. And if you put your tent down there, you're not going to get a flash flood because it rained over your head. Oh no, a flood's coming. You're going to get it because of rain up canyon, or depending on the river, up in the mountains, 10, 20 miles away, hours before. That's when the flood's going to hit you. So you're not even aware that a flood's coming. That's why it's a flash flood, right? So just when you go into the canyons, make sure you camp on higher ground. Don't get into a box canyon. Low ground, other than that, you'll be fine. The final element is wind. It gets windy. It can be dead calm for days on end, but when it does blow up there, the wind filters into the canyons, it accelerates, and it can blow fast. I don't know the gauge on it, but just my estimation is that 60-mile-an-hour gusts can happen. When you stake your tent down on a sandbar, a 60-mile-an-hour gust will just take your tent away. The stakes don't do a darn thing. I actually, on a real dirt stake my tent in, one time had to chase my tent several hundred yards up a canyon, and I only got my tent because it happened to like hit a rock and was stuck to a rock. I probably would have found it eventually, but that was pretty funny, chasing a tent through a canyon. But the other thing is, when it's windy, you're gonna get waves. You're gonna get big waves. You have to be very careful. This isn't like being on a lake where you play around and play with the canoe and, oh, we tipped a canoe, ha ha ha. Like, if you tip a canoe, it's a drag. Your stuff, even though it's in dry bags, is going to be floating downriver. You may not get all of it back. I've tipped a canoe once in my life on a river, and I found stuff the following day downriver. We saw packed. Our sleeping bags were just up against some sticks. We slept without sleeping bags for the night. So when the wind blows and you get these waves, you just got to get off the water. Like, you just have to, even if you pull up to the shore and just have to sit there for a couple hours, take the wind serious, and you'll be fine. But yeah, so whether it's unpredictable, but prepare for it and just take it serious. You'll be fine. So this is one of the only ruins that's actually marked, because everyone knows where this is that comes here. But this is a cabin built hundred and something years ago. All that's left is the stone fireplaces still here, and well, the wood, as long as it chooses to remain with us. But the other reason for stopping here, and you won't be able to see it, but going to pan over to that mesa up there, way on top of that mesa was a building that was built thousands of years ago, and it still remains. It's all built with stone. It's a little bit of a hike to get up there, but we're going to be heading up there right now, and we'll continue this. So I actually misspoke a bit ago. I said that this had been around for thousands of years. It's actually been around about 800 or 900 years. It's the Anasazi, and I hope I got that right. That is who built the cliff dwellings all the way from here, all the way out into Mesa Verde in Colorado, which isn't that far from here. Actually, we're fairly close. And I suspect there's been a little bit of rebuilding here, but the original structure this is what the structure looked like. There are 2 rooms separated by a door. I suspect it's so the parents can have privacy from the kids. That'd be why I would have a second room on my stone dwelling anyways. So this is the view. So you can see, you probably can't even actually see, but down below is where we hiked from, down at the river base. And this actually bends all the way around that way. And if you come over here, that down there is where we're heading. And if you can see the sandbars in the middle of the water, those are campgrounds. We're not going to stop because we just left this morning, but this is the only aerial view we're going to get on the whole trip. The rest of the trip's going to be down below for the most part, but this is one place you can get up high and actually take a look at the surroundings. Amazing. the things to do on the trip or the experience. And I may be overstepping myself here, because I'm not trying to tell you what your adventure should be or what your experience should be. But just a couple thoughts, take it for what it's worth. This trip really isn't a party trip. I've never seen it that way. You know, if you want to go get drunk and jump in the water and cliff dive, you know, Lake Havasu and Lake Powell and the Colorado River, and there's all these great places for that. But this is more, it's so much more cerebral. If there was ever a place where you really want to be present, it's here. Like, this is a place to be present with your thoughts, present with your partner, present with nature. I mean, I'm not I'm not religious, but I would think if you wanted to be present with your God, this would probably be a place to feel that connection as well. It's just not, this isn't about the party. I just have never viewed this trip as that. I've had people that I've shown pictures or videos to, and they've commented on, God, that'd be a great place to take psychedelics. I've heard that multiple times. And I mean, the location for that experience is they're probably right. The problem with that is that you tend to kind of ruin the next several days afterwards. So having an experience for 4 hours or 12 hours that takes away from the next several days doesn't seem like something to do, honestly. Again, not telling you how to live your life. Not trying to be too much of a teetotaler. Is that the right word? Teetotaler? But that's just not the trip I've ever had here or even thought. So who should take this trip? Now, obviously, everyone's invited to do this. This won't restrict you, but not every single person will enjoy this, for sure. And no matter who you are, not every person you bring with you will make it enjoyable for you. I mean, it's just, you know, like anything, it just isn't for everybody. So right off the bat, you got to be the adventuresome type. You got to be willing to rough it. I talked about canoes being a luxury compared to backcountry, but it's not a luxury compared to the real world. You're in a tent, you're covered in sand, you're covered in dirt, you're dirty, you're smelly, the river's too cold, the wind's blowing. You got to like that stuff, or at least be willing to bear it. And you got to be someone who's positive and optimistic. If you're negative and a pessimist, you are going to have a miserable time. And if you bring that person with you, I promise you, this is not going to be a good trip. Things are going to go wrong. You're going to forget stuff. The wind's going to howl one night and fill your tent full of sand. You're going to get sunburned. You're going to get scratched up on a rock. I mean, heck, a couple nights ago, and we'll actually post a picture of this, I had what I think was a spider. It bit my eyelid, and my eye swelled almost like all the way shut. Dozens of miles from civilization and days from medical care. That's just, you know, you got to be able to roll with that and find that funny, or else, yeah, it's going to be a long week for sure. I think you want to be with people that just can be quiet and serene and positive and connect. Kids. Definitely kids, certain kids can enjoy this trip. Right off the bat, if you have kids, I would say under 10, definitely probably don't want to bring them the first time. If you come out and do it and feel they can handle it, cool. But the first trip, I would say kind of maybe steer away from that. Older kids are hit or miss. You are going to be disconnected from cell phones, disconnected from social media, the internet. It's going to be, that's a challenge it's a challenge for a lot of adults too, but if you've grown up in that world, it's even harder for you. Now, if you think that would be good for them, then you're the parent and that's your call. And it might very well be. They might discover all sorts of things about life they never had a chance to before. It could be a great experience. It also could be something that isn't fun and something that they may enjoy when they're older, but when you're younger, that they just don't connect to. The thing about this trip is it's not about fishing and swimming in the river and cliff diving. I mean, it's just not that type of fun. It's a different type of fun. You see a lot of older people on this trip who like the moments of relaxation in between a lot of hard work. But that has to be part of the experience, that hard work. So yeah, not just kids though. Anybody that isn't going to be fine disconnected from technology, you may struggle a bit here, although it may also be good for you. You never know. As far as pets, I know Tex Riverways doesn't do dogs. I don't know if the other outfitter does. I suspect not. If one of them did, the other one probably would have to. It doesn't really feel like that type of trip where you want to like deal with a dog the whole time. I mean, you want people who can be quiet, and you certainly don't want a barking dog interrupting the silence. Not to mention, you can hear people a couple miles upriver. You don't want to be being loud and taking away from other people's experience. I mean, you may not see people because it's so desolate and there's so few people out here, but you could have people around the bend who could hear you, like they could hear your words if you talk loudly. And partying and dogs and, even loud kids, I think can take away from other people's experience. So I just keep that in mind. It's just a way of kind of a mutual respect for what most people are on this trip for. There's no rules against it, but if we can coexist, we can all enjoy the same experience. Now, please don't click off because I'm not a dog person, but I am a cat person. And if you have a cat, absolutely bring your cat. Take that cat, stick it on your lap the whole trip. I think that'd be the coolest thing. I mean, not really, but I think it would. If I saw someone with a cat, I'd probably think it was cool. The cat also might run away or get eaten by mountain lions, so it might not be the best move. Final thing is bringing a partner. My suggestion to you, if you are right now in a relationship and you think you and your partner might break up a year from now, take them on this trip. I promise you, I guarantee you that you will break up on this trip and you will save yourself an entire year that you could be finding your soulmate that you spent between now and the breakup. This trip can put a strain on a relationship that isn't that might be struggling. However, it's also an opportunity to bond with a partner in a way that you almost can't do any other time in your entire life. I mean, the two of you surviving against nature, protecting each other. Both of you have to work. One person can't work while one person's lazy. There's not enough time in the day for one person to do all the work. So you have got to be a team. And then you don't have the distractions of social media and television and jobs and even kids. God, I can't think of a better way to connect with someone than this trip. I truly can't. So the one thing I'll say is that if you take the trip with a partner, at the end of the week, you will not be in the same relationship as when you started. It's either going to be much, much better or much, much worse. But it's going to change. Hopefully for the better. I'm rooting for you guys. But like I said, if you're in a sketchy situation, this is probably not the trip for you unless you want to speed up the breakup process. But other than that, I mean, I think just positive people that want to connect to nature, people that are chill. You'll have a good time. Okay, so let's talk about what to eat and drink on your trip. Now, of course, it's a matter of personal taste. You're going to eat what you want to eat, but you have more options because you're in a canoe. I mean, if you are strictly in a backcountry, you can only carry so much weight. a lot of beef jerky and crackers and freeze-dried food. I mean, there's only so much you can do when you have to pack everything in. You have to filter all your own water, of course, because carrying water would be a nightmare. But you do have some luxuries in the canoe, especially if you're not used to real roughing it. It's a great way to kind of ease the newbies into it because, number one, we have an ice chest. Your ice won't stay good for the whole trip, but for a portion of this trip, we've got fresh fruit, cold, yogurt, cheese, things that can stay cold. Also, we can pop water bottles in and keep a constant supply of cold drinks. Water bottles, by the way, I personally like bringing these because they're already measured out. They also work as cups. You can put Mio in them or some kind of mix to get a drink, but it's also a measuring cup because the coolest trick, I mean, it's not really a trick, but there are freeze-dried meals. Now, before you cringe, I think they're called MREs maybe in the military. I've had a couple, they're awful. I've been told that they're awful. That's not what this is. This is these full cooked, well, uncooked at the moment meals. Kathmandu curry, beef stew, Southwest skillet, had Caribbean jerk chicken last night. You can get lasagna, you can get everything. I mean, anything you can imagine. They are not bad. I don't care what anybody says. They are somewhere between fast food and restaurant quality. Doesn't sound like high praise. Let's call them Applebee's light. Not the greatest thing you've ever eaten in your life, but when you're in the middle of the desert or the mountains and you can have lasagna, it is a treat. The way you cook them is, that's why I like these, this is already pre-measured, is that you boil water, you add a certain amount of water, you tear off the top, pour the water in, close it, mix it up, let it sit for 10 minutes, it rehydrates, and you've got yourself a hot cooked meal. Now the only trick is boiling the water. Now this is probably the coolest piece of engineering. If you haven't seen these are so cool. And we're about to have coffee, so this is how easy it is to make coffee with these gadgets. So take a thing of propane. Right here is a fully operating stove. Pop the sides out, flip the tips, screw it on top of the propane. Take a kettle, pour in. We're only doing half cups of coffee because we already drank our coffee this morning, so this is going to be more like espresso. Add the water, turn on the gas, start the fire. Fully operating stove. It's loud. I'll talk louder in about 45 seconds, and you can have hot cooked meals along with all the roughing and stuff you're going to be bringing. So it's a little trick. Don't buy these at Walmart. There is some brands at Walmart that are awful, and my advice, don't buy the ones that say eggs. The only thing I've ever eaten that was terrible were the eggs. It tastes like cheap hotel. Well, they are rehydrated dry eggs. They're pretty terrible. But other than the eggs, I have yet to have a bad meal with those. Although you may want to bring some salt and pepper, garlic, onion, something if you like to spice it up a bit. But yeah, eating is a piece of cake. So among the treasures to be discovered here, God, that sounded like a tour guide video, but you have to earn everything out here. Like, just about nothing is handed to you, but the rewards are enormous. So we took a pretty decent hike from down on the river, and we hiked up to some petroglyphs. And please forgive me if I'm wrong, but I believe these are about 800 years old. It's so bizarre. Excuse me while I get onto my soapbox over here. It's so bizarre and insulting when people talk about how recent our history is in this country, because it started in 1776 or it started in 1492. The history of this land, it was named our country a couple hundred years ago, but it goes back 12,000 years. And it's such an injustice when history books start in the 15th century. It just makes no sense. But this took place more recently than that. So in this case, it took place longer than Europeans have been here. So let's take a look around. I won't try to pretend I'm smarter than I am and say I understand any of it, just that it's beautiful and old. And up here, there's no signs telling you to find this. We had to look and hunt for it. You can kind of find a trail if you look hard enough. You can find footprints that have come before you, but you really have to dig to find these things up here. But yeah, it's a special thing. So this is my favorite place on this whole trip. It blows my mind that this long ago somebody lived here, and I mean, they must have been so proud to have this amazing shelter. I wonder if they appreciated the view. I mean, if you grew up with this every day, this might just be your city. So there might not be the appreciation we get when we come from urban to this, but it would be spectacular. All right, so if you made it this far in this podcast, it's a totally different type of podcast. I suspect most people tuned out by now. I'm going to guess that if you made it this far, that you're interested in doing this trip, or it seems fun or interesting, or you're curious or something. You're not listening to me talk for an hour to look at my pretty face. That ship sailed, if it ever was in port. I don't know. Definitely not a ship that exists today. But I think the only thing left is how to do it. And I don't mean logistics. I mean, I've covered everything on this trip that you need to know. You know, it's all there. There's a roadmap to doing this. I mean, the cost is not going to be a barrier for you, because it's $1,000 trip. I mean, with a plane ticket, you could do this trip for if you save $100 a month. I mean, if you smoke cigarettes, you're going to spend $200 a month on that, and everyone who smokes can afford cigarettes. So money's not the barrier. So the question is, what is the barrier? And what I've learned, and the way I've tried to live my life, has been, I wanted to live a life that I felt would be worth writing an autobiography about. You know, I wanted to live a life full of adventure, and in order to do that, it involved taking risks, lots of risks. It involves failing often. The most exciting things in life I found have the risk of failure. If there's a 100% chance of success, I don't get the same satisfaction out of accomplishing them. I like things that have a chance of failing. Failing is never a bad thing. Failing's always a good thing. I've always learned from every failure and grown from it, and assessed, gone back, sometimes tried it again. I've had incredible highs and incredible lows by doing this, but I would rather accept some incredible lows than have a life without the incredible highs. Me personally. I think that the vast majority of people that decide to do this trip aren't going to do it. And it's sad. It really is. There's millions of people who canoe in the world. And if you go to a website and you look up the top 10 great multi-day canoe destinations in the world, there's listed, this comes up number one. If you're a canoe person, you know about this trip. Millions of people know about this trip, and less than 20 people a day set out on it. And the question's why? Like, why, if this is something you want to do, don't you do it? And I think it differs from person to person, but I think there's a number of barriers. One is fear. And I don't mean fear of the canoe tipping or running out of food. That's not going to happen. But there's something that gets in the way, something that makes people afraid to pull the trigger on things. It's a fear of failure, I think. But there's no way to fail at this trip. If you decide to do it, the river flows very gradually, but it flows downhill, and you will get dropped off upriver. You will wind up downriver. You can't fail at this entire trip. You'll fail along the way. Just this morning I dropped our blanket into the water, and we're going to go blanketless tonight. I failed in that moment, but you won't fail at the whole trip. So don't let fear of anything stop you. By the way, this is not about this trip. This is about anything in life. If you want to write a book, or you want to go hike the Appalachian Trail, or you want to start a business, or you want to go on tour, you want to pursue a relationship with someone you don't think is obtainable, it doesn't matter what it is. The fear of failure, if it stops you from going after the thing you want, then you need to assess why that's the case. For me, it's come down to the fear of failure has never been a barrier for me, because I've always thought, well, what exactly does failure look like? Because sometimes fear of failure comes from not even examining what it is. And when you think about what does failure look like, well, how bad is it really? I want to ask that girl out on a date, and I'm afraid of failure, afraid of rejection, so I don't do it. But the reality is, how bad is it if she says no? Well, it stings for a second, and you get over it. Your friends give you crap for shooting for a 9 when you should stick with 7s. I don't know. But it wasn't that bad. And as soon as you recognize that the failure doesn't hurt or penalize you that badly, then there's nothing to be afraid of. Another thing is anxiety. In my experience at life, I think that anxiety is the number one thing that interferes with people's ability to succeed in life, career, relationships, sports. It doesn't matter what it is, but the anxiety, the what I don't know if it's chemical, if it's cortisol, but whatever it is that gets into your brain that makes you want to avoid that feeling at all costs, can prevent you from achieving all the incredible highs you get when you do achieve things. It's a little bit like a fear of failure, but it's not a fear of failure, it's a fear of pain. And that's what anxiety is. It's a type of pain. And if anxiety is a barrier to you, I think that it's something to examine. Go seek help for that. I don't recommend medication, but it's even possible medication if it's too strong. But if anxiety prevents you from doing the things you want to do in life, then it's something that has to be tackled, or else it's going to bury you. You'll be that way your whole life. Another thing that the best excuse, by the way, by best I mean the most common and lamest excuse for not doing the things you want to do in life is timing. Like, you hear this all the time, you know, I'm going to, as soon as I finish up A, B, and C, I'm going to start writing my novel next year. Or as soon as I save up enough money, as soon as I get my ducks in a row, as soon as I write up my business plan, I'm going to start the business. I'm going to go on tour next year for sure. I just got to take care of this thing at work. Oh, then of course my parents are, they just moved into a convalescent home. That's going to take up the next 6 months of my life. But as soon as they're all situated, I'll be able to take care of that. Your ducks are never in a row. The timing is never right to do anything big, ever. I've never once seen everything line up to, oh my God, now I have the time to achieve this thing that I'm going for. It just doesn't work that way. And if you're waiting for that to happen, next thing you know, 10, 20 years have gone by, and then you haven't done the thing you want to do. And I've just learned that the reason why I've been able to do so much is I've pulled the trigger on every idea. You know what? I'm going to write my book. Not next year. I'm going to start typing today. I'm going to go on tour. When? May. Oh, shoot, it's April. Time to go on. Time to better get my butt in order. I'm going to run special needs events. I'm going to start this business or that business, or build this website, or start this podcast. And I mean, God, if I had tried to start this podcast by laying out a game plan and a business plan and a marketing plan and built the infrastructure around it, and I started soliciting advertisers and trying to find out where endorsements are going to come from, and then of course I had to line up my first 10 guests, because what am I going to do? God forbid I don't have a guest. How will I ever find a guest with all the professional disc golfers and cool people out there? If I had done that, there would still be no podcast. There also wouldn't be one next year or the year after. You know, so you just got to pull the trigger on ideas. And yeah, you're going to fail. You know, the quicker you pull the trigger, the more you dive in head first, you will fail more frequently. But the alternative to set yourself up to never failing is stuff never gets done. You don't do anything. And I mean, this is coming across possibly incredibly preachy, and I don't care, because I love my frisbee family. And it pains me. I feel empathy and pain when I tell people who ask me about going on tour how they can do it. And I say, oh, well, here, I'll lay out the game plan. Here's how you make money on tour. Boom, 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 boom. Money's no longer a barrier. You don't even have to win tournaments or make money at tournaments, and you could go out on tour. Piece of cake. And by the way, call me or email me anytime, and I'll walk you through any of the speed bumps to come up along the ways. There's zero reason not to go on tour. And I've given that speech to 50 people, no, 50, God, 100 people. And probably 3 of them have gone out on tour, 97 of them haven't. And it breaks my heart, because I'm sure some of them have legitimate reasons for it. I mean, if all of a sudden it turns out your girlfriend's pregnant, like life changed, I get it. But I think that most of them have bullshit excuses for not doing this thing that they want to do, if they really truly want to do it. And so that's what this trip is. I mean, this is a very small thing. It's 1 week of your life. And again, this isn't for everybody. I'm not saying you need to do this trip to start the ball rolling for life. What I'm saying is if you want to do this trip, it's life-changing. And not just because of what you gain from the trip, but then you've achieved something hard. You've done something hard, incredibly fun, incredibly rewarding. And then maybe if you do something like this, the next thing isn't quite so hard. Because I promise you'll succeed at this trip. Nothing's going to stop you if you decide to do this. You can't fail. The river flows downstream. You won't die of dehydration. There's water. You cannot fail if you decide to do this. You just have to figure out what's stopping you in doing it. So, open invitation to everybody. If you're interested in doing this, you message me, and I'll give you my phone number, and I'll talk you through it. I'll walk you through everything I know from this trip. But if you want to do it, pull the trigger and do this thing. I promise you can. I'm going to add one more video at the end of this. I am going to go through a checklist of supplies to bring on the trip, but I felt like that was probably the most boring part of this video. When I say video, podcast. It's important, but I mean, checklist is real important. By the way, speaking of checklist on this trip, talk about failing. I forgot to bring a map. Now, why do you need a map for, right? I mean, it's a river, right? We're not going to get lost on the river. The reason for the map is we had 7 days to go 55 miles. And if you don't keep the pace that you want to keep, next thing you know, you have too many miles the last day. You don't make it on your pickup time. Or worse, stressed out over missing a pickup time and then getting there 3 days early and spending 3 of the 7 days waiting at the Colorado River to get picked up, right? So I'll make a checklist. Don't forget the map. Hopefully I'll cover everything on the list so you don't fail the way I did, but I had the best time of my life. Failure didn't prevent that. So if you are never, ever going to take this trip, go ahead and click off the podcast now. There's nothing left that'll be of interest to you. This is just going to be just a few more of the logistics that you probably need to know for the trip, or at least it would help put your mind at ease that you aren't going to run into any huge problems. So the first is you get dropped off either at the midway point, 55 miles up, or 110 miles up. And then you can choose which point to get out. Typically you do one of the 55-mile stretches. That's what most people do. You are getting out at the halfway point at Mineral Bottom. Nothing really to know there. There is a sign that says Mineral Bottom, one of the only signs on the entire trip. You'll also probably see cars, canoes, other signs of life. It's the only signs of civilization you see, right? So that one's easy. Spanish Bottom's a little trickier. So when you get to Spanish Bottom, first you hit the confluence, which is where the Green River goes down and it hits the Colorado River, which is going this direction. This is a little misleading, but Colorado's going left to right. There's no rapids. You're not going to get caught in a whirlpool. I mean, like, you don't even know that you've left one river, gone to the other, but you're on the Colorado. There will be a sign on the left-hand side of the river that says hazard, heavy, severe rapids 2 miles downriver at Cataract Canyon. 2 miles is a long ways. You're not going to accidentally go down the canyon. But you need to sign in there because you need to choose which of the campgrounds you're going to be taking at Spanish Bottom, which is about a mile past the confluence and the sign. Spanish Bottom basically looks like this. It's just an area that opens up and there's just more room off the river than a lot of other places. And it's pretty obvious. The river turns to the left and there's this cove cut out. That is Spanish Bottom. You can, well, there's 3 choices. You can either pull out an Upper Spanish Bottom, which is right at the top of the big arc, and you'll see a big sandbar or sandy area where people have pulled out before. You can go to Lower Spanish Bottom, which is a little cove over there, or you can choose to camp on the sandbar here on the opposite side of the river. Now, the river is so low that it would be pretty hard to pull out of Lower Spanish Bottom, because it's like a wall. You'd have to carry your gear up. So we're on the sandbar. We were hoping to not be in a sandbar again, but yeah, that's the nature of the trip. And I think actually probably everyone's going to be on the sandbar, even though technically it's one campsite. It's huge. There's room for everybody here. So that's how you get out of the river. And then they'll go over the whole checklist as far as how you empty your boat and store your gear and all that stuff. But I wanted to send a video of what this looked like so you don't have anxiety over missing it and winding up down the rapids. It will not happen by accident. You'll have no problem. All right. I talked briefly about using the restroom on the trip. This is the elephant in the room. It's the big, stinky brown elephant in the room. First off, you pee in the river. Always pee in the river. Peeing on dry land, there's no water, there's no runoff. It is eventually going to smell, maybe for a while. Just don't do it. Just everyone pees in the river. Over here is your toilet, and everybody on the trip is required. It is an actual requirement. It's not a recommendation. You have to bring one of those toilets with you. Now, it's both horrific and not as bad as you might think. The horrific part is, there's no porta potties, there's no pit toilets. I mean, you take this box and you set it somewhere and go to the bathroom. You either have to find a way to cover yourself up, or else you're exposed. You may wind up getting closer to the people in your group than you have been before. But it's a shared suffering. It's not a big deal. Not fun, not a big deal. It's filled with chemicals inside that help dilute the smell. It is sealed super tight. It's this real thick steel heavy box. It will, if you do it right, it will not smell. You won't smell it at all on the trip. There's even a plastic toilet seat that sits on top. It's moderately comfortable. So, I mean, as comfortable as a toilet can be anyways. So, but that's what you're going to be doing on this trip. I saved this for the end. I've showed this at the beginning. A lot of people, especially their partners, already tune out at this point. So hopefully you think it's so much fun at this point. Now you're like, really? But it's worth it. All right, quick checklist on things to bring. Obviously, you need a lot of water. You can filter water, but filtering water, if you've done that before, or boiling, is a lot of work, and you go through so much water. I really recommend just bringing water. Really, you can do it in the canoe. There's plenty of room. They recommend a gallon per person per day. In the middle of the summer, you want more than that. Whatever you think you're going to drink, maximum add 50% to that, and you'll probably go through most of it. The desert sucks the hydration out of you. I mean, it's not like it's the desert. It's not like anywhere else. It's harsh. Tent, obviously. Sleeping bags. You could probably get away with not having sleeping bags in July and August, but it's also not the best time to come. So sleeping bags, sleeping pads. If you were always and knew you were going to be on a sandbar, you could probably get away with little or no, at the very least, little sleeping pads. But when you are on hard rock, even like a 1-inch pad is not comfortable at all. I try to get at least a 2.5 or a 3-inch inflatable sleeping pad. Like it's worth it. If it takes a little extra room over the tiniest one, it's going to be worth doing for sure. It is going to get cold at night. Again, maybe not in a couple months, but for the most part, plan on it getting chilly at night. Deserts get cold. So in addition to like shorts and a t-shirt, you want to have at least one pair of long pants and then layers. A long shirt, maybe a heavy long shirt. I like having a shirt that has a hoodie because it keeps your head warm at night. In addition to the sleeping bag, not to mention, because of the way the desert works and you drink so much water during the day, you may get up 3 or 4 times a night to go pee. And if it's cold out and you get your sleeping bag, that hoodie it's money. But plan on that. Plan on cold and just bring layers. Food, obviously, that's the easy one. Bring whatever food you want, but make sure if you're going to have a stove, bring extra lighters. Don't just bring one. Keep your lighters in separate packs. It doesn't help to have backup lighters if they're all in the same Ziploc baggie. If that falls in the water and gets wet, you lose everything. So store lighters in a couple different places. I mean, it's critical. We couldn't do campfires out here because of the fire ban, but typically you have a fire ban in campfires. Just bring the extra lighters. Sunscreen should be obvious, but put it on your checklist. Don't forget. I've done that once. It was horrible. Chapstick, absolutely. Bug spray. It depends on the time of year. We didn't use any bug spray this trip, but there are times of year when the bugs can be bad. You can talk to techs, they'll let you know when those are. A basic first aid kit is something that is just essential on something like this. Chairs. Bring your foldable chairs. You get them at Walmart for 10 bucks. You can throw them away after the trip. Just buy them when you're in town if you have to, and then toss them out if you don't want to take them on the plane. But you want chairs, especially on the sandbars. If not, you're kind of scrambling sometimes to be comfortable. Pillows, absolutely. Wrap them in a trash bag. By the way, extra trash bags, because you're going to have room for trash. In fact, bring a box of like 10 1-gallon Ziploc bags and a thing of trash bags, and you will find use for them. You have to have dry bags. Okay, dry bags are, do I have any out here? No, it doesn't matter. They're just basically this thick bag that keeps stuff in it dry. And the idea is you put anything in there that can't get wet. So you don't put your tent in there or your folding chairs in there, but clothing, sleeping bag, medications, things like that. If the canoe tips, which can happen, then, or you just drop it in the water, the dry bags start to float down the river. You just kind of swim down, grab them, like it's not going to be the end of the world. You haven't drenched something that can't get dry. They will rent dry bags right off the bat. There's 3 types of dry bags. There's the super expensive $150 ones. You do not need those. But the ones that cost like $9.95 they're really thin and small. There's these in-between ones that cost like 25, 30 bucks that are going to be great. So you should be able to find the middle ones. Techs will rent almost anything you want. So if you're coming on, on a plane and you don't want to pack the gear, techs will rent it to you, and they're really reasonable. They're not, they're a cool company. They're not going to gouge you. At least I've never felt gouged. Canoe chairs. So you're sitting day after day after day on a canoe seat. A canoe chair is just basically a chair that has a couple straps that hold it, and it gives you just a little bit of back support. They will rent those at techs. You don't have to buy those, but make sure you ask for them. Bring a map. You map, especially the first time you come here. Again, you're not going to get lost, obviously, but you want to know where you are so you can pace your trip. You don't want to have these long days where you're having to work hard all day. That's almost a wasted day. You want to pace yourself. And so just having the map to kind of stay up with where you are and when is super handy. Obviously, you want your cell phones because you want to take pictures. You make sure you bring chargers. If you don't get a charger, we have been charging on, we bought it used at a used gear store. There's lots of used gear stores if you look around. It was 50 bucks, and we plugged our phone in, and during the day we plugged the phone into this solar charger. So it doesn't even store the battery. It just, we pop it up, tilt it towards the sun, attach the phone, and we have kept this phone charged all week. In fact, we have a actual battery charger that we haven't used once this whole week, and we're not going to. But bring a charger. I can't imagine anything worse than being on the trip and having your phone die with 2 days to go and seeing something really cool you can't get a picture of, because you can't just like drive back out the next day and get it. So whatever you gotta do to keep your charge, for sure. Cooking supplies, cooking utensils, that goes with the food, but just plan on that. You do need those basic things. Toilet paper, wipies, super handy, obviously. And I think that is, that's probably pretty close to it. Ice chest. Blocks of ice are better than bags of ice. I know it's October, but we're on day 6 of our trip, and our blocks of ice are still ice. So I thought it would last 3 or 4 days, but it's lasted every day. Camp soap and camp toothpaste. You get special soap and special toothpaste that's biodegradable. Do not use regular soap or shampoo in the water. Some of it's very harmful for the environment. I don't know which type is, which type isn't. But if it says camp soap, that's what it's for. Then you can actually go in, because you're going to bathe. Probably, if you're traveling with me, I hope you bathe during the week. Not required, but you have a river right there, and you have the soap to do it. So bring a towel as well. A lot of these things, one towel works for 4 people. Don't bring 4 towels for 4 people. I think shoes. I have a pair of cheap tennis shoes that I got at Walmart for $15 that I'm going to throw away afterwards. They're already falling apart because of the water. But boat shoes are great. You don't need multiple pairs of shoes, although I said that's not really true. You may, depending on what you're doing, want hiking boots. I chose not to bring my boots because I'm familiar with the terrain. Even though it's rough terrain, I'm familiar with where we're going to be going. But if you're ever not sure, boots are always better. But you don't want to ride in your boots in the canoe. And if you go barefoot, you just put sunscreen on your feet. Like for sure, the sun will be brutal. I know I'm kind of just running through a lot right here, but just the more I can do to make sure that you have a checklist and you don't have a bad time, I would like to do that for you. I can't think of anything else. The second that we turn off the camera, I'm going to think of something. Let me think. Give me 5 more seconds. This is dead air, by the way, for the non-video version. I think we covered everything. So do this trip. If you want to do it, pull the trigger, and please send me pictures from your trip. I can't wait to see and hear all about it. We are about to go for a hike, and we're recording some of this out of order, so don't use this as a checklist of things to come see and when to see them. Some of these are not in order. They've been shot after, and with the magic of post-production, we're going to hopefully put something together that's cohesive, but this is later in the trip, then it'll probably be on the podcast. So right up here, I don't think this has a name, so I'm calling it the Cliffs of Insanity. And we are about to climb up the Cliffs of Insanity. I believe it's about 1,000 feet, just about straight up, with some wonderful cliff faces to look down. And I don't know, I'm scared of heights, but I've done it before. It's not too bad. But we're gonna go up top to something called the Dollhouse, and there are a bunch of cool rock formations that I haven't been to in about 10 years. So, and yeah, we're gonna bring you guys with us. And this is the Dollhouse. I hope the video comes out well because the sun's in the wrong spot. But yeah, this was the reward for the hike up the Cliffs of Insanity. Super steep, not a lot of switchbacks. A lot of it just went kind of straight up. But yeah, this is the type of thing you get out here in Canyonlands. And the best of my knowledge, there's a group of 4 people up here. And other than that, we have it all to ourselves. And it's big, but I won't shoot a whole ton of footage, but there's more Dollhouse back that way.